Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another edition of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, publisher, editor of Native News Online. And the Department of Interior embarked on a journey started in July of 2022, the Road to Healing tour. And it was a tour that was a 12-stop tour that allowed Secretary Deb Haaland and Assistant Secretary Bryan Newland listen to the survivors and the descendants of survivors about boarding school experiences. It's a very powerful journey. Native News Online was in attendance at every single one. And today we have a very special guest, no other than the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. Welcome, Secretary Haaland, to Native Bidaské.
Thank you, Levi. It's so nice to be here with you.
Yes, and Secretary Haaland, you know, I was there and I saw you and you said every single session that you will weep with them. And, you know, I saw the tissues on the table. Now, you used the tissues, and it was a pretty compelling testimony that survivors and their descendants gave during the tour. Is there one, or what's your biggest takeaway from what you heard?
Well, I thank you again for having me, and thank you for coming to every single Road to Healing session that we had. Your presence there meant a lot to us because you reported on it so that Indian country knew what we were doing. And also, Levi, thank you for writing your personal piece as well. I appreciated reading that, and that, you know, I start out every session by saying, the boarding school era assimilation policy has affected every Indigenous person I know, and that's the honest to God truth. And I think that, you know, overall, what I think about most is that people have carried this with them for decades and decades. The survivors, they have had this hovering over their lives for as long as they have had that experience. And I hope that by these Road to Healing sessions that they've been able to let some of that go and, you know, find some healing in their hearts for the things that they have gone through.
Yes, and the Road to Healing tour wasn't just about survivors telling their stories, but just as important, I think, is the fact that there's listening that took place. You listened, Assistant Secretary Newland listened to the survivors, and they were heard. Why was that so important, in your opinion, that part of the healing process?
Well, I mean, if we think about Indian history in this country since the time that, you know, the United States essentially started, Indian country has not had a seat at the table for so many of those years, decades, in fact, you know, a couple centuries. And so I think it's important that that we bring folks to the table. Their voices are important. You know, a while back, I read a quote saying that the worst thing that befalls Indian country is our invisibility. And so I think, you know, I have often said that Native American history is American history. And it's so important that America, all of America, grapples with these painful eras, these painful assimilation policy eras that Native Americans have gone through in our country. And quite frankly, I am grateful that our ancestors persevered. Because we still have our languages, maybe not as robustly as we originally did, but we still have so much of what our ancestors fought for, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, and I appreciate the fact that shortly after the Camp Loops situation was revealed, you established the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. And I have written this, and I really believe this in my heart, that had a non-native been Secretary of the Interior, the initiative never would have happened. So compliments to you. Let me ask you this, though. what are the fellow cabinet members saying about this initiative? Have they embraced what you've done? Are they listening to what you say when you meet with them? Or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My fellow cabinet members, my former colleagues in the House, we've had many Congress people sit through so much of our Road to Healing sessions. They have come, if we're in their districts, they have come to join us to make sure that their constituents know that they care also. I have gotten a very positive support from my colleagues. I want to just say that, you know, the president reinvigorated the White House Council on Native American Affairs, and that's a council that, you know, we meet regularly, and it's all of my colleagues in the cabinet. And so I report on this, and I have done that. And so we're all here together. The president has made Indian country a priority. And so I'm grateful to have that support.
Yes, that's great. And you mentioned the congressional delegation or people who have been there. I also remember the governor of Arizona was at both sessions in Arizona. I was very impressed. And
Indeed.
Of course, our good friend, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan was up in Minnesota. So you've had some really great support. So I'm really happy for that.
Yeah. Yes.
How important is, in terms of the next steps, the healing process, what are the next steps now that the Road to Healing is over? Right.
Well, we have volume 2 of our boarding school initiative report coming out. That will document more schools that we found. It will document, you know, more numbers that are, you know, more detailed numbers, I guess you could say. And then also it will document some of the cemeteries that we have been able to gain knowledge about. So there's that. There's also an oral history project that will be housed with the Smithsonian. And I am grateful for that. The Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition is helping us with that as well. I want to also give a tremendous thank you to Director Shelley Lowe of the National Endowment for the Humanities, who has also been at every single session. And Director Lowe has the National Endowment for the Humanities, under her leadership, has helped us tremendously to finance this, you know, everything that we're doing. So we've gotten a lot of support across this administration, and I couldn't be prouder.
Yeah, you know, one of the fears that I've heard in Indian country is that, and not to get into politics too heavy here, but the previous administration, you know, we heard there were rumors of people burning papers in fireplaces, et cetera, et cetera. How do we ensure the Indian country that the documents, the testimony you heard will not be destroyed in the future? I think it's a question that comes up in discussion when I'm out and about.
Right. Well, of course, you know, we're following all the laws when it comes to preserving records that we are supposed to. And, you know, anything that we generate through the Department of the Interior has a place in the history of our country. And so we're going to follow all of the rules, all of the laws. We're going to make sure that everything is preserved the way it needs to be on our end. And then, of course, we have the Oral History Project that will live forever at the Smithsonian.
Yeah, that, to me, that's very, very powerful. And you know, my own grandmother went to Indian boarding schools, and she never talked about it. And I know your grandparents went. Did they ever talk about it to you?
So unfortunately, my grandfather, God rest his soul, he passed away when I was still a child. So I didn't ever have a chance to talk to him about anything in detail. But my grandmother, you know, during the time I was working on my undergraduate career, I have my degree in English, and it's in professional writing. I would go out to Mesita Village nearly every weekend and sit with my grandmother at her table. I recorded her, I took notes, I talked to her while she was ironing or cooking. And those are, you know, these are some of the stories that she would tell me. strangely though, Levi, she never said anything abject about her boarding school years. She said her rosary dutifully every night before she went to bed. She made sure that we grew up Catholics. I got my first communion at the church at Mesita Village, at the behest of my grandmother. So she was very religious. She went to a religious boarding school in Santa Fe, and you couldn't get her to say anything negative about her boarding school experience. Although she did tell me, as you've heard me say in some of the sessions, that when she was 8 years old, the priest came around the village and rounded up the children and put them on a train to Santa Fe. And so that's telling enough. I know how tall an 8-year-old is. And when I think about that, it's devastating to think that somebody would have taken my own child when they were 8. So it's pretty clear that this affected her. I'm happy that I was able to speak with her about those things. But honestly, I'm grateful, as Pueblo Indians, I know some people were taken to boarding school and they came back and their families weren't there any longer. I'm grateful that my grandmother came home after 5 years to a family and a community and continued her life as a Pueblo girl. And then, of course, so much of what I learned about being a Pueblo woman, I learned from my grandmother.
Yeah, that's precious. That is, yeah. I'm glad she came back too. I'm glad my grandmother survived. So, because we know that a lot of other families didn't have such great history of having that. You were up in Anchorage, and there is a raising of the totem pole, and I watched you, took pictures of you, putting some, I believe it was cedar, blessing the totem pole with the community, the local community. Tell me this: what were you thinking up there when that happened? It was quite a powerful experience for me as a journalist. So I want to know how the Secretary of the Interior took that.
Right. Well, of course, I was so honored and so grateful that the Alaska Native community, and they were Alaska Natives from all parts of the state. I'm so grateful that they included me in that. I was honored. I mean, it's almost hard to put into words, but, Bryan Newland, our Assistant Secretary, Joaquin Gallegos, one of our really important staff, a lot of our team helped to actually move the totem pole from the location where it was to the location of its final home. And it was wonderful to be a part of all of that for us. And I mean, I've been so honored in this job to have traveled. Now, I haven't visited every tribe, but I have visited a number of tribes, and I've always been honored to have opportunities to experience tribes, meeting them where they are. And that was true for Alaska at the Alaska Native Cultural Heritage Center. And so I will just say that it was an experience that I'll never forget. It was a joyous occasion. So many people came out to join, even if they didn't have a hands on the totem pole. They were there to support everyone who did. And so I'm really grateful that is how they were able to express what this healing means to them, and it's that important. It was
quite a remarkable day, and I will always remember it as well. It was so powerful to me. I just love the community coming together, and I'm a person that really believes in peace and unity and all that. I learned that from my grandfather, Levi White Pigeon. So I was thrilled to be there with the
Excellent
group. Hey, in terms of healing, are there plans that maybe more dollars will be given to tribe tribal communities for mental health counseling. I mean, it's a big undertaking, I know, and the scab has been removed, so to speak. And now the healing needs to take place.
Yes, yes. Well, Levi, you might also know that through IHS and their partners, we've had that kind of support at every single Road to Healing. We're very grateful to Rosalind So for ensuring that happened. In fact, she was at our last event in Montana, and so. I mean, we can only hope, of course, right? We are going to always support healing. You know, I support the bill that NABS has put forth for the Native American boarding schools, and we'll always be supportive of a way forward. And of course, in this day and age, behavioral health support is important for many reasons, and certainly this is absolutely one of them.
Most definitely. And Secretary Haaland, we really appreciate being here, but November is Native American Heritage Month. Give us your thoughts on that as you would conclude.
Right. So, well, of course, I'm happy that we celebrate Native American Heritage Month. Those of us who are Native, we celebrate being Native probably every day of the year, but it's an opportunity for us to be seen, to talk about who we are, about our history, about our contributions to this country. At every Road to Healing event, most everyone, we've had an honor guard from the community who will display our American flag and the flag of the particular tribe. We are proud Americans, as well as our, being from our 574 federally recognized tribes and any number of state recognized tribes. So we should just make sure that we're being seen, that we're being heard during Native American Heritage Month. I feel like for our children who are going to public school, they can raise that to their teachers or the communities that they are a part of. This is Native American Heritage Month is part of how we can express our part in history. Native American history is American history. And so I just think that we should be essentially loud and proud about who we are and how we are and what, how we contribute to the overall success of this country.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on Native Bidaské, and we wish you well in all your endeavors. You're doing a great job at the Department of the Interior, and you have a great team. And Bryan, Assistant Secretary Bryan Newland and I are friends, and he's from Michigan. I'm from Michigan. We're going to have to find a way to get you to Michigan. I know you came as a congressman with the Saginaw Chippewa tribe to Mount Pleasant, but we got to figure out next year how to get Secretary Haaland to Michigan. To have some kind. I talked to some of the tribal leaders here. So
excellent. Well, I'm always in favor of visiting tribes anywhere in the country. I feel at home with. When I visit tribal communities, and it's a blessing for me to have those opportunities. So let Bryan know, and I'd love to come and visit you in your ancestral homeland, Levi.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much. Chimigwich to you. And to our viewers, we've had a special guest, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, talked about the Road to Healing tour. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Native Bidaské. In the meantime, enjoy Native American Heritage Month. Be, as she said, loud and proud of who we are as Native people. Chimigwech.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chimigwech.